Hey there everybody, Travis Bowman here. I'm a fingerstyle guitar player and retro video game nerd. It's time for another round of retro video game pickups. I thought about doing this video on the drive home today, and I thought, yeah, I got a couple of things recently that's probably enough to do a video. I hope I have enough to talk about some things for at least 10 minutes or so. But then once I had everything on the table, it was like, oh, I got a lot of stuff recently since the last pickups video. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So first up, let's talk about Sonic and Knuckles. I actually got this recently from my good buddy Scott, and it was missing the flap. He had it for quite some time, I guess, and he didn't even know what it was really. He was like, here, it's a video game thing, you can have this. And I said, thanks and everything, but it was missing the flap. It turns out that there is a 3D print for the flap on Sonic and Knuckles. So if you're missing the cover, the case cover, whatever you want to call it, the flap on top, you can 3D print this if you have a 3D printer or know somebody that does have a 3D printer. I know somebody that has a 3D printer, and his name is Scott, the very same gentleman. So yeah, he gave me this cartridge, and I was like basically saying, hey, it's not complete. Can you 3D print this for me? And so he did, and came back the next day, and it fits like a glove. And if you look at it, it's kind of hard to tell, but the plastic is a different color. It's a different color black. But it doesn't matter to me. I don't care as long as that cartridge port is covered. And on the back there, it says property of Zachary. So I made a whole video about this if you're interested in seeing more, and you can find the link to this 3D print in the description below as well. Let's continue with the Scott stuff. Scott gave me quite a bit of some cool stuff this time. He also hooked me up with the Genie Video Deck Enhancer for the original Nintendo Entertainment System. It's very filthy. I haven't had a chance to clean it just yet, but it does come with the book, which is really cool. This kind of stuff is just so far-fetched these days compared to, years ago. But on the NES, you can input some codes that will give you certain cheats in your games, and this book right here has pretty much all of them as far as I can see. So, for example, Shinobi, we've got infinite lives, 1 life, 6 lives, 9 lives, infinite life energy, turbo running, just random stuff like that you can use to enhance your experience on the original Nintendo. So thanks again, Scott. Really appreciate you hooking me up with this. Being a new owner of a 3D printer, Scott has been printing me a bunch of stuff just to do it, just for fun. And I imagine if I owned a 3D printer someday, I'd probably do the same thing. But what we have right here is a little display holder situation for the NES. Like NES cartridges. Like the color, it's like a crystal color here, crystal white, and the games are sitting just fine in there. So it's another display piece that I'm, quite frankly, really happy to have, so thanks to Scott. Scott also hooked me up with a couple of controller display stands. I've got one right here that's a similar crystal sort of color display for the Sega Dreamcast. You can't see it probably from that distance, but it's got the logo for the Dreamcast as well as the name Dreamcast on the bottom there. It kind of perfectly houses this controller right there. I've had to wrap the wire around the controller because when I tried to set it up, the wire was kind of pulling on the back. It's not the best fit for this, but hey, it was free. Scott gave it to me. He gives me stuff like this just to test it out to see if it works. In addition to that, this one's the cooler of the two. This is your N64 controller, and it says Nintendo 64 right down there. It's just one solid color, but that's fine. I imagine if you had a 3D printer with the ability to do multiple colors, you could make this really crazy. But what I really like about this in particular is the spot right here for the controller to be inserted, the controller cable, that input right there. It looks really nice. It displays really nice, and you've got a little spot on the reverse to where you can wrap that controller cable around and kind of keep it out of the way. As somebody who grew up with the N64, I do have fond memories of the N64 controller, but unfortunately my hands are just too damn big for it these days. I'm super happy to have the Retro Fighters Brawler 64 instead. Otherwise, I would kind of have no solution for that N64 controller. I have nothing bad to say about the N64 controller. It's a great controller that's wildly misunderstood and made fun of over the years, but it's just too awkward for my giant monkey hands at this point. But thanks for the display, Scott. I really appreciate you. It's really, really cool. Speaking of N64, for some reason I had the wild idea to start collecting N64 complete in-box games. Now, I'm not rich. I'm not made of money. So why would I do this? Simply because it's actually kind of cheap, depending on the game that you're going after. Obviously, if you're going after the heavy hitters and some of the rare titles, you're going to be spending the big bucks. But most of the games that I played when I was a kid aren't the heavy hitters, and those are the ones that I have fond memories of. So first up, you can see it on the TV back there that's being shown on display, is 1080 Snowboarding. Really, really do like this game a lot. You know, it's not a particularly good game, but I have a lot of fond memories of it, playing this game back in the day with my family, way, way back in the day. And one of the main things that we would make fun of is what the characters would say as you choose them. You know, you go through the character select and you go through the 360 view of everybody that's in this cabin in the middle of nowhere, you know, getting ready to go snowboarding. I believe the guy's name was Ricky Winterborn. He's the goofy guy that you select in the character select screen. But anyway, when you select your character, you have to press A twice. So you press A to look at them, you know, and look at their stats and figure out if that's who you really want to start the game with. And then you press A again to confirm, meaning, yeah, I'll go with this guy. But it's so funny, this Ricky Winterborn guy, you press A and he like looks at you and he goes, yeah. And then you press A again and he goes, sure, I'll do it. I don't know why that tickled me so much when I was a kid, but it's still a fond memory today. And you know what? This game, complete in the box, meaning it's got the manual and it's got the game and the box. I don't really care about having games complete in box, quote unquote, the literal meaning with all the registration cards and stuff like that. That's a little bit too out there for me. I don't really care that much. I just want a nice display piece and a reminder of a game that I really, really enjoyed from my childhood. But I paid like 25 bucks for this, something like that. It really was not that expensive at all. So that's what I'm talking about. I've done a whole video about this too. It's either out right now or it will be out soon on my channel about collecting N64 complete in box games if you want to check that out. The other N64 game that I got complete in box is Nightmare Creatures. I really, really liked this game when I was a kid. It was freaking scary, man. And it's kind of comical today because, you know, the graphics, you know, there's so many Resident Evil games out there right now that are extremely scary and gory and gruesome and quite frankly creepy. This game is creepy. It's very creepy. It's got some jump scares in there, but it's very tame compared to what we're used to in this day and age. But is this the best version of this game? Probably not. I would say probably the PlayStation 1 has the better port of this game, but I still really enjoyed this on the N64, and this one was about 40 or 50 bucks, so a little bit more, but I'm still glad to have it. The box is not in the best shape, but in the box protector, you can hardly tell, and it looks great on display just like 1080 Snowboarding does. So I'm an avid Facebook Marketplace user. I'm kind of an addict, to be honest. I get on there at least, you know, once a day, sometimes 2, 3, 4, 5 times a day, depending on how my day's going and how busy I am. If I have some extra time, I'll get on there and just browse for a minute. And, you know, it's kind of like playing the lottery on the Facebook Marketplace. I've done a video about that as well, about finding good deals on the Facebook Marketplace and what to do once you find those. But I actually found a lot of Wii U games for a pretty decent price. So we've got Tank for the Wii U. I've actually never played this game. Zelda Breath of the Wild, actually had to get that, man. That's a great game, fantastic game. And it came out on the Wii U first. A lot of people associate that as being a Nintendo Switch game, but it came out on the Wii U first. You've got Super Smash Bros. For the Wii U. I am not a Smash Bros. Guy at all, but like I said, it came in the lot, so of course I'm gonna get it. And then we've got new Super Mario's U with new Super Luigi Bros. U. So that's really, really cool. You know, the Wii U is a really cool console, and I'm really, really glad to have it and experience some of those great games on that system. All right, let's go with this stack of games right here. The majority of this, actually, pretty much all of this, I bought with my own money, but I got some really good deals on this stuff. The first game right here is one that I just picked up not, you know, 2 hours ago. It was very, very recent, but this is Metal Gear Solid VR missions for the PS1. On the back it says, your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to battle your way through over 300 classified operations against relentless professional killers. It's pretty much Metal Gear Solid if it was a simulation. You know, you have one area that you're supposed to go through and either kill the enemies or escape undetected. Believe it or not, I never really played Metal Gear Solid back when it was relevant, when I was a kid. I spent most of my time playing this. I actually got this right down the road at a place called Movie Gallery. Long time ago. It was a competitor to Blockbuster back in the day. And that's where I got this game, I think, on clearance back when the PlayStation 2 came out. They were getting rid of their PS1 inventory for a decent price. I had this back in the day. Now here's something really interesting that I'd like to mention to get into your brain, because it's stuck in mine. If you're watching this video, it's going to have to get stuck in yours. I'm sorry. But I come from a small town. You know, I've lived here all my life. I live in a town of about 5,000 people, if that. So I got this locally from a gentleman, and I'm wondering, you know, where did he get it? Because like I said previously, just now, I used to have this game back in the day. There is a small chance that this was the game that I had back in the day. Who knows? Could it be my copy? We'll never know. But that kind of thing really, really interests me. And it doesn't keep me up at night, but it gets my brain thinking. You know, I'm starting to try to really kind of get into my memories and remember what that game looked like. Was there any unique, you know, scuff marks or scratches, or was there something with the manual? Anytime I get something locally that I used to have as a kid, I can't help but think, man, maybe this is the exact copy that I used to have. But we'll never know. No use losing sleep over it, but still, really glad to get this. I paid 15 bucks for it. I got it at a pretty good price, considering that it sells for 20 or above these days. So these next two games are Dreamcast related, and I don't really get that much Dreamcast stuff anymore because it's so expensive, but I am really excited when I see something like this in person. This is a Japanese game, and it's not exclusive to Japan. This one came out in the US. It's called Maken X. It's a very, very interesting first-person beat-em-up type situation. I don't want to say shooter because you don't really shoot anything. You have a giant sword or some sort of melee weapon. I've played through it quite a bit. I haven't beaten it by any means, but I actually got this on Mercari, the US version, and it was shipped to my door, and it looked just fine. There were hardly any scratches, surface scratches, or anything like that, but for some reason, I could not get past the first cinematic. And I tested it with the GDMU to see, you know, what's supposed to happen, and unfortunately, it just wouldn't work. So I tested it out on a couple of different Dreamcasts, and unfortunately it just would not work for me, so I got a refund for it. Mercari, if you're not familiar, is a wonderful website that's a competitor to eBay, and if you get something like that, the return policy is actually very, very good. So I got my money back and shipped it back to the guy and explained, hey, I'm sorry, but this is not reading on my Dreamcast, and I'm a Dreamcast guy. I've got multiple Dreamcasts, and this is not working. So he was very, very gracious and helpful, and he didn't, you know, make a big deal out of it, so that's great. Found this one locally at a game exchange of all places. Apparently, there was a local guy who was super into the Dreamcast, and he had a bunch of his heavy hitter games, and he dropped these off. Now, I did a video a while back about going to do video game hunting with a YouTuber named Adam Koralik. Adam and I went to this game exchange, and I actually got some of these games from that guy that dropped them off at Game Exchange. I got Skies of Arcadia as well as Phantasy Star Online version 1 at a pretty good price. I did not realize that they had a separate bin for Japanese stuff. There was an entire bin full of Japanese games. This is the only one that really caught my eye. It was $15. Considering that the US version sells for upwards of $60, maybe even $80 right now, that was a good deal. Considering that you don't need to know the Japanese language to play the game, this is a hell of a buy. So I'm really glad to get that. In addition, I'm assuming this came from the same seller. This is also something that I used to have back in the day. This is Cheats and Codes Volume 1. Okay, so yeah, you can use it to play your Dreamcast games and use cheats and stuff like that. That's not really my interest. So why do I have it? This acts as a boot disc for Japanese games and also European games. I used to have this back in the day. I got it on eBay a long time ago. We're talking like 15 years ago, man. But I got this with the intention of playing Shenmue 2, the PAL version. So the Dreamcast is kind of region locked in that aspect. You can't just boot to another game. But if you have a boot disc like this, then it works. And you don't need to input the cheats. It just, you know, you put this in, and then you put your game in, you close the lid, and it just works like magic. So really, really super glad to pick this up. It was like $6, and it's in great condition too. Is it rare? No, it's just a freaking Cheats and Codes disc. Volume 1. They never came out with a Volume 2, by the way, as far as I know. But this is how I play Maken X on my Dreamcast, using this boot disc. Okay, so I got a couple PS5 games recently because I do the thing where I wait for a game to be out for quite some time before I pull the trigger and spend money on it, because this used to be like a $60 game, and now it was an $18 game, and that is Resident Evil Village, or Resident Evil 8. I've heard a lot of good things about this game, and I was a super big fan of the Resident Evil 4 remake, so I thought it's kind of like that, but in first person instead of third person, so yeah, I'll check that out, and my God, this was a great game, man. It's rare these days that I find a game and want to play it every single night when I get done with everything else that I've got going on. But I beat this game, and we're playing through it again. My girlfriend Emily and I are starting it again, and it's great. It's such a great game. The gameplay is super on point. It's just the right amount of creepy, and it takes a couple of different turns too. It's actiony as all get out, but there's one section of the game that is just pure freaking psychological horror. I won't spoil it for you. If you're into horror games or action games for that matter, you should probably check this game out, and you can get it for a decent price physically these days too. So Emily doesn't know this, but I got her a gift. She will receive this tomorrow. This is The Last of Us Part 2 Remastered. We played through The Last of Us Part 1 together, and so it's time to continue the story, and I actually got this for a pretty decent price. This is still a $60 game, brand new. This is The Last of Us Part 2 Remastered, of course, for the PS5. The one that's not remastered is a little less expensive, obviously, but this is still selling brand new for $60. I got this for about half that price. So, I mean, we don't care. Used games, new games, it doesn't matter. If we can get a good deal and get some games, then we're going to do it, and that's exactly what I did here. So, I've heard a lot of negative things about this as far as the story. I know what happens. I'm familiar with what happens. If you know what happens, let's just leave it at that. We won't spoil it for anybody. But still, even though that happens in this game, we still want to check it out. And I don't know if Emily does know that that happened, but she'll find out soon enough. So because I enjoyed Resident Evil 8 or Village so much, I realized that, you know, I never played Resident Evil 7, which is the precursor to that game. And it turns out I didn't really need to know the story of Resident Evil 7 to enjoy Resident Evil 8, but still, I wanted to go back and check that out, so I also picked this up. Got this at a pretty good price. It was like 10 bucks, and I did not realize this, but if you put this in your PlayStation 5, it being a PlayStation 4 game, there is a free upgrade to get the PS5 enhanced version. You don't have to pay anything for it, so I definitely took advantage of that. Super excited to jump into this game and experience more of that story for Ethan Winters, who is one of my new favorite Resident Evil protagonists. This game right here is very, very controversial, and I avoided it for quite some time. It came out in 2020, but I decided, you know what? If I can get it for 20 bucks, I'll give it a shot, and that's exactly how much I paid for it. This is $13 for the PlayStation 5, the remake. Here's the original that I've had for quite some time on the Xbox. Ironically, I first played this game when it was relevant on the PlayStation 2, and I don't have that copy anymore. I must have sold it a long time ago. But what this is a first-person shooter, a very cartoony first-person shooter with cel-shaded graphics, and it's extremely well done. At least it was on the original game back in the day. I really, really enjoy that art style, and I feel like a lot of games just stay away from that style for some reason, but I loved it, man. Jet Set Radio, all those games that use those cel-shaded style graphics are really cool in my opinion. So this kind of plays out like a comic book that you play in first-person mode. So there's a conspiracy afoot. You've been accused of assassinating the president, so you've got to try to prove your innocence, but are you really innocent? We don't know because the protagonist also has amnesia. I wanted to check this out, but I didn't because I heard it was really bad. I heard that it was very buggy and that they haven't made any progress on patches and stuff to make it playable. But I said, you know what? I played the original game so much and I really loved it. I at least owe it to myself to check it out and see what it's like for myself. I've made it through the 4th mission, and it is a little clunky, but I haven't found anything game-breaking yet. It's still a really fun game, and I still prefer the original at this point, but I really, really like playing through this. It's crazy seeing a game that you've identified with from your childhood and to see it remade like this. It's pretty much the same game, but they've changed a couple of different things, you know, that sort of thing, but I don't know, man, for 20 bucks, it's pretty cool. And I also like this little slip cover that they absolutely did not have to do, but they did anyway. When you pull that off, you can see it says 13 on the slip cover that perfectly covers the other 13 that's on the game case itself. So 13, really, really cool game. So I completed my video game room tour video a few months ago. Really appreciate you guys for checking that out and for sharing your comments on that video as well. But one thing that I did not have on that console rack back there with all of those other 20 consoles is an original Nintendo, an NES. And, you know, I've had this one for quite some time, but I just never had it hooked up. And the reason was because it's so hard to have it hooked up with today's modern technology. You know, you can do RF and you can do composite out, and that's it. And it just looks so bad. And I'd like to get all my consoles hooked up with an RGB style video quality if I can. And unfortunately, you can't do that with the NES unless you modify it. So for the longest time, I tried other avenues. So I've got the original NES right here. Now, right here is the AVS, which is a modern NES made by a company called Retro USB. It's this little trapezoid-looking situation, but you open up the flap right here. You've got a cartridge slot that's kind of VHS style, just like the original Nintendo is, but you also have a slot right here for your Famicom games, the Japanese games that we never got. It's a really cool system. It was kind of pricey for what it is, to be honest. It's got a really nice user-friendly interface. It's got HDMI out and does 720p, and it comes with its own power supply powered by 5 volts. It's a really, really cool system. It's got 4 controller ports on there, which is kind of excessive, but I think some NES games actually take advantage of that. But anyway, I wanted to test it out to see if it would satisfy my needs. And for the most part, it does. However, it's HDMI out, it's 720p only, and I've got a 4K television and an old school CRT PVM right behind me. It was really bothering me that every single one of my analog consoles can be hooked up and displayed on that PVM back there except for this. And if you know the NES, you know that all that nostalgia comes from being displayed on a CRT television. And it looks great, don't get me wrong. And I'm going to be doing a video comparing both the modern and retro solutions for your NES soon, so make sure you subscribe so you don't miss that. But I wanted to see if there's something else I could do, something else with my original Nintendo here. So I set this aside for now, and I contacted my good buddy Cody, local guy who does a lot of modding stuff for me. If you've been watching my channel for a while, you know what Cody's all about and what he does. He's an amazing guy. He's super nice and super friendly. He's a family man that makes some time out of his weekends to help me with stuff like this. So that's exactly what we've done here. With this NES, we have done Tim Worthington's RGB mod. So on the back here, you can see I've cut a hole in the plastic and we have an SNES or N64 style multi-out there. You can get composite and I believe S-video out of this too, but what I was mainly interested in is RGB SCART. That's exactly what I've done. I've got it hooked up with RGB SCART and it's ready to go. So I actually got this NES from my neighbor like 15 years ago. We're still great friends. We're still neighbors to this day. Kind of crazy because it's a husband and wife, and I met them before they had kids, and now they have 3 who are pretty much at the age of going to college and stuff. It's kind of crazy. It's kind of crazy, but a long time ago when the kids were very, very, very small, they had no interest in this sort of thing. And I asked them if they had an NES, and they said yes, of course. The deal was they would let me have it as long as I never sold it. Okay, I'll make that deal. So I think they just wanted to make sure that it's going to be, kept in the family sort of situation. I've known them a long time. You know how neighbors are. If you got good neighbors, you want to keep them around for a long time. And I wouldn't trade those neighbors for anything in the entire world. They're some of the best neighbors you could possibly have. But I still have it. I still have it, and I kept it all these years. And with that simple modification, now it can be viewed on a modern display. And it's not a very destructive modification. Yeah, I had to cut just the tiniest little square in the plastic, but for the most part, it's still original. You can still use this with composite and RF if you wanted to. I don't know why you want to these days, but it's still possible. I figured I'm going to solve this issue, and I'm going to essentially complete my console collection because I've got all the stuff over there. I got everything Sega. I've got the Neo Geo. I've got the PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2, PlayStation 3, PlayStation 5, all that stuff. But the main thing I was missing at the time was an NES. And I wanted to fix that issue and have the NES completely playable at any time at a moment's notice. So, of course, I had to reach out to my buddies at Stone Age Gamer to get this EverDrive N8 Pro. I really appreciate those guys at Stone Age Gamer. The EverDrive is a wonderful, wonderful cartridge that allows you to insert an SD card and put all of your ROMs on there and stuff like that. And this has a lot of extra features too. You can play Famicom games on it, as well as Famicom Disk System games and all sorts of ROM hacks and stuff. A plethora of crazy NES stuff is possible with this cartridge on original hardware. So really happy to finally get the best flash cartridge for the NES and stay that way. Thanks to Stone Age Gamer for this, for the EverDrive N8 Pro. Really happy to have that. So I wanted to get a decent controller to go with the NES because unfortunately those controller cables for the original controllers just aren't long enough for my situation behind me. So I decided to go with Retrobit and try out this Origin 8 wireless controller. Again, I'm going to do a separate video on all of this NES stuff, so I don't want to talk about it too much here. But what I really like about the Origin 8 is that it's got a USB port for charging, it's wireless, and it has flippable switches for your turbo buttons, which is really, really nice. Used to be you could only get the turbo situation on like the NES Max controller, which is a terrible controller, and the Advantage, the arcade stick thing too. But super glad to have this, and using this to play NES games with that EverDrive and that RGB connection is just a dream come true. Super happy to have it. Finally, we've got a brand new controller on the table today. This is the Battler GC wireless controller for use with the Nintendo GameCube. I'm always stoked to get brand new modern controllers designed to be used with old retro systems. This is a wonderful controller from Retro Fighters. I've been using Retro Fighters controllers for several years now. I've bought a lot of them, more than I'd like to admit. All of the good ones that they've come out with, and they've come out with a lot of good ones. All of those I have purchased for my collection, and you know, I've purchased multiple controllers to use with my buddies when we have video game nights and stuff like that. But I've yet to receive this one until now. Retro Fighters actually reached out to me and asked me if I would be interested in reviewing this controller, so we're going to have a video coming out fairly soon comparing these modern GameCube controllers, not just Retro Fighters, but the ones from Nixie and 8-Bit Do as well. So I'm very excited to look into that and compare these controllers for you guys. And super big thanks to Retro Fighters. I'm a big fan of their work. They've been doing some cool stuff for a long time, and to have them reach out to me and see value in what I do on YouTube and want to work with me is a dream come true too. So big thanks to the guys at Retro Fighters. Let me know what you guys think about some of the stuff that you've seen in this video. What do you think about video games in your local area, finding those games, those retro games that you probably maybe used to have when you were a kid? Is it the exact same copy? We'll never know. Does that bother you like it bothers me? It really does bother me. I really don't like it. Thank you guys so much for sticking with me. Thanks for subscribing. Thanks for leaving a comment and liking this video as well. I do appreciate that. My voice is dying. I'm losing my voice because I've been talking so much. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.